I believed I had married the love of my life, but everything changed when his father passed away. He transformed into a different person. And by different, I mean he began cheating on me. However, the situation took a much darker turn when he discovered the inheritance that came with his father's passing. He wasn't pleased with the conditions, and I wasn't willing to give in to his demands. My husband spiraled out of control after his father's death, and I couldn't tell if it was due to grief or sheer defiance. It made me wonder if I had unwittingly married a complete psycho. For some background, I had met my husband at a charity event for work. We struck up a conversation and exchanged numbers, though we didn't start talking seriously until a few months later. He appeared charming and sincere, showing particular interest in my worldview, especially since he had grown up in a staunchly religious household, while I held no religious beliefs. I was concerned that this might pose a problem, but he always reassured me that it wouldn't. He even joked about his family's disapproval of him dating someone non-religious. Looking back, I wonder if this was his sole reason for dating me, given what I know now. After a year of seeing each other, he decided it was time for me to meet his family. I remember feeling incredibly nervous about how they would receive me, given my non-religious beliefs, especially his father. Aiden had described his dad as tyrannical, ruling their lives with an iron fist. He claimed that he missed out on many experiences due to his father's strictness during his upbringing. Needless to say, I was already terrified of his father before I even met him. We were headed to a small family dinner at their place, with only his immediate family present: his parents, his brother, his sister-in-law, and their child. When we arrived, his brother was outside on the phone, so I was introduced to him first, and he seemed friendly enough. The next person I met was Aiden's sister-in-law and her 3-year-old niece. They were both lovely, and we had a lot to talk about, especially since she also worked in event planning coordination. While we chatted, Aiden's parents entered the room, and he introduced me to them. I was taken aback when I realized who his father was. I won't reveal his identity, but his father was a prominent figure, responsible for a major charitable organization both locally and internationally. I had seen Aiden's parents at an event I attended, but he had never mentioned their connection to him. His mother appeared somewhat distant but not unkind. I later discovered that Aiden's mother had always been cautious around the girls he brought home because he had a tendency to be attracted to what he called the wild type. Surprisingly, Aiden's father was the complete opposite of what I had expected. He was genuinely kind and understanding, not bothered at all by my lack of religious beliefs. He explained that he valued kindness and principles in people, regardless of their religious background. During our conversation, he shared that Aiden's sister-in-law used to handle the foundation, but had become less involved after becoming a mother. He believed in not taking people away from their families, especially when their children were young. That's why he had outsourced the last event to me. Contrary to my initial assumptions, Aiden's family turned out to be ordinary people with a touch of religion in their lives. Aiden downplayed his father's acceptance, suggesting that his dad probably assumed it was just another phase during his college years. He claimed he had dated numerous girls back then who were what he vaguely referred to as out there, and his parents had always viewed it as an act of defiance. According to Aiden, he had become more serious about me, taking a break from dating to focus on personal growth. Despite the red flags, I believed his explanations, naively accepting his version of events because I was deeply in love. We continued dating for another year, and then he proposed. We decided to live together before getting married, and during another family event, I had a candid conversation with Aiden's brother. He expressed concern about Aiden's behavior, recalling how Aiden used to rebel against their parents, especially their father, during their teenage years. Aiden had a history of fights, particularly because his father was strict about their activities. However, Aiden's father seemed pleased about our engagement, even offering his backyard for our wedding, a proposal Aiden initially resisted, but eventually accepted. After 2 years of living together and saving money, we set a wedding date. I convinced Aiden to honor his father's offer and have the wedding in his parents' backyard. Things seemed fine until 2 months ago when Aiden's father suffered a fatal aneurysm. A drastic change came over Aiden. He started coming home late, often drunk. I initially attributed it to grief, but his behavior raised concerns. When I spoke to his brother, he revealed that Aiden didn't seem sad about their father's death. Instead, he appeared relieved. Aiden's erratic behavior and the uncertainty surrounding their family business prompted me to confront him myself. I stayed up waiting for Aiden, and he didn't return home until around 1 in the morning. He reeked of alcohol and stumbled through the house. Despite knowing it was futile to reason with him in his intoxicated state, I insisted we needed to talk. I emphasized that he shouldn't be driving while drunk, as it could lead to harming himself or someone else. He dismissed my concern, telling me to mind my own business, ending the conversation abruptly. There was no point in discussing anything with him while he was drunk, so I decided to go to bed. The following morning, I woke up to find him vomiting in the bathroom. Seeing he had sobered up slightly, I gave him aspirin and some dry crackers. I questioned his irresponsible behavior, to which he replied that now that his father was no longer controlling him, he felt free to do as he pleased. I pointed out the dangers of drunk driving and his late-night antics, mentioning his brother's worries about him. Aiden grew angry, criticizing his brother and father, claiming they were obsessed with appearances and cared little about his happiness. He felt they were constantly trying to involve him in a lifestyle he had no interest in and judged him whenever he deviated from their expectations. It was in this moment that I realized Aiden's perceptions of his family might be distorted. While I understood he might carry some residual trauma from his sheltered childhood, it seemed as though he sought to provoke his father and make his family miserable as a form of retaliation. However, his attempts only resulted in his own misery, as they didn't take the bait. Despite my non-religious beliefs, Aiden's family had always been warm and accepting, never imposing their faith or lifestyle on me. His father even invited me to church once, emphasizing there was no pressure for me to attend. Perhaps I had only seen the best side of Aiden's father. I couldn't be certain of what he was like when Aiden was younger. Regardless, it was evident that Aiden needed to mature and move past his grievances to find his own path in life. I confronted him directly, asking if his unhappiness extended to our marriage. He admitted he wasn't happy. I was left speechless, so I got up and left. Currently, I'm writing this from my mother's place, where I've been staying for the past week. Aiden hasn't reached out. And even his brother mentioned he wasn't talking to him either. I'm at a loss about what to do. While this situation undoubtedly warrants considering a divorce, I'm hesitant to make a rash decision. I wonder if his behavior might be a coping mechanism for dealing with his father's death. I'm considering giving him some time to cool off and then suggesting counseling. Top comments from the original post. Comment 1. I empathize with you, OP. Your husband's behavior seems problematic, and while I don't advocate for immediately resorting to divorce in every marital issue, given his consistent suspicious behavior, it might be worth considering, especially considering his recent actions. I find it puzzling why he chose this moment, after his father's death, to act this way. Wouldn't it have more impact if his dad were still alive? Unless his intentions are something other than tarnishing the family name, his reasoning just doesn't make sense to me. Regardless, I think it's crucial to assess your relationship after this incident. Addressing these issues now can prevent future problems. I hope counseling proves helpful. Best of luck. Comment 2. OP, it appears your husband might be grappling with religious trauma from his childhood, as you suggested. If your father-in-law was different when Aiden was a child, there might be deep-seated issues at play. I've seen cases where strict evangelicals resort to harsh disciplinary methods to keep their kids in line. Some churches even pressure members to remain in unhappy marriages, fearing divorce. Aiden's fixation on his father's opinion indicates underlying issues that need exploration. While therapy is a step in the right direction, it might not be enough. Individual therapy sessions for your husband could help him work through his childhood trauma. Just because his family is pleasant around you doesn't necessarily mean they're genuinely nice. It might simply be a facade tailored for your benefit. Update number 1. I'm struggling to find the right words for this update. I feel utterly numb. I'm still at my mother's place, but I did return home briefly after about 2 weeks away. I attempted to reach out to Aiden through calls and texts, but he refused to respond. Then, I received a call from his sister-in-law, asking to meet for lunch. When we met, her husband was with her at a local coffee shop. She inquired about how I was doing and about the situation with Aiden. I didn't hold back. I shared the truth about his late nights, excessive drinking, and overall irresponsible behavior. I explained that I had been staying at my mother's to give him space before suggesting couples therapy. Unfortunately, he hadn't been answering my calls. During our conversation, my brother-in-law dropped a bombshell. Aiden had been using the foundation's funds to indulge in expensive hotel rooms and escorts. When confronted, Aiden claimed he had inherited part of the foundation, justifying his spending. However, his brother clarified that matters regarding their father's will were still being resolved, and Aiden's claims were baseless. Aiden had also informed his brother that we were no longer together, citing my supposed move out as his justification. Of course, this was far from the truth. Aiden's brother and sister-in-law apologized profusely for the mess, expressing their disbelief. They had thought Aiden had settled down when he married me, just as I had believed. Aiden's anger toward their father, they explained, stemmed from their high school years when he used to hang out with a rowdy crowd, engaging in activities that alarmed their father due to their family's tragic history involving a drunk driver. Grateful for their honesty, I returned home the next day and began packing most of my belongings. Aiden walked in while I was in the midst of it all, silent. He handed me an envelope containing divorce papers. He revealed that he was aware his siblings had told me everything and felt no remorse. He claimed the only reason he hadn't divorced sooner was to ensure he wouldn't be written out of his father's will. With his father gone, he asserted his newfound freedom. He offered me the house and informed me that movers would collect his belongings the next day. He planned to upgrade to something bigger and better with his inheritance share. I was so shocked that I couldn't utter a word. I continued packing silently, wanting to be away from him. Once I had loaded my belongings into my car, I drove back to my parents' place. I showed them the divorce papers and retreated to my room, where I broke down in tears. I couldn't comprehend the cruel turn my life had taken. Despite my unwavering commitment, he discarded our marriage as if it meant nothing. Tomorrow, I have an appointment scheduled with a divorce attorney. I don't intend to fight this. If he wants to leave, that's fine with me. Here's the second update for you all. And things have taken quite an interesting turn. I had my meeting with my lawyer, who ensured I understood the terms outlined in the settlement. I would keep the house, and we would each retain our own assets, including wedding rings and gifts. Since we didn't have a joint bank account, there were no financial complications to resolve. Honestly, I might end up selling the house. There are no good memories associated with it anymore. Since then, I've been trying to move past this situation. I'm still staying at my parents' place for now. They seem happy to have me around, or maybe they're just trying to cheer me up. I plan to leave after selling the house and find something smaller. Now, here's the intriguing part. Out of nowhere, I received a call from Aiden's brother. We engaged in some normal small talk, and then he asked if I was free the following Monday. I was, so he insisted I join them for a meeting with their dad's lawyer to finalize his estate matters. I was unsure of my involvement, but he insisted I should come and assured me that he'd make sure Aiden wouldn't speak to me and that we'd be seated far apart. Reluctantly, I agreed. On Monday morning, I arrived at the lawyer's office. Aiden's brother, now my former brother-in-law, met me outside and thanked me for coming. He escorted me to the lawyer's office, where Aiden, his mother, and a man I assumed was the lawyer were present. I approached their mother, offering my condolences and inquiring about her well-being. We hadn't spoken since the funeral. She expressed her sympathies for what happened between Aiden and me. According to her, she and her late husband had done their best to guide him, but he chose a different path. The lawyer then sat us all down, apologizing for the time it took to settle the father's affairs due to various complexities. The crucial part of the meeting was this: most of the money would be donated to charity to support the foundation. The foundation's management would pass to the oldest son, excluding Aiden. The remaining funds were allocated to his wife, his eldest son, and his wife, as well as a school fund for his grandchild. Surprisingly, he left money for Aiden, but with a condition. Our marriage had to last at least 5 years. Additionally, if we had a child, a school fund would be established for them. Notably, he left money for me without any attached conditions. This wasn't a small sum. We were talking millions. The lawyer's face when his father expressed concern that Aiden might squander the money on inappropriate indulgences like escorts and alcohol. At the end of the meeting, the lawyer informed us that he would schedule individual signing sessions for the paperwork and addressed any questions or concerns we had. As soon as we were dismissed, I swiftly left, noticing Aiden's gaze following me from across the room, as if he wanted to talk. I left before he could approach me. As I write this the next morning, Aiden has been bombarding my phone with calls and messages. Despite his efforts, I want absolutely nothing to do with him after all he put me through. Update number 3. Aiden's behavior has become increasingly erratic in his search for me. After failing to reach me through my phone, he attempted to contact his brother to inquire about my whereabouts. However, I hadn't seen any of them since our meeting with the lawyer. Aiden's brother warned me to lay low for a while since Aiden was frantically searching for me. True to his words, Aiden showed up at my parents' house one day looking for me. Fortunately, I wasn't there. My dad informed him that I was out of town for an event and uncertain about my return date. Aiden left a message, urging me to call him, insisting that we needed to talk. I had no desire to engage with him further, but his persistent attempts to reach me pressured me into making the call to put an end to his relentless pursuit. I decided to call him when I knew I had ample time and emotional strength to handle the conversation. I didn't want him to believe he still held any power over me. I called around 6 o'clock in the evening, assuming he would be at home. He answered eagerly, expressing happiness at hearing from me and inquiring about my well-being. He spoke as if he hadn't cast aside our marriage without a second thought. He started by apologizing for his selfishness during the divorce and acknowledged the pain he caused me. He admitted he should have respected the commitment we made, even if he wasn't as content as he hoped to be. I let him speak, then sighed and calmly stated that I had moved on from our marriage, focusing on other aspects of my life. I then confronted him, asking for the real reason he was checking up on me. He swore it was merely to reconnect, how I was doing, and if we could have more conversations in the future. I responded with a straightforward no, and made it clear that if he only called to check on my well-being, there was nothing else to discuss. He urged me to wait, and then finally, the truth emerged. Aiden admitted that filing for divorce had been a mistake. He confessed that he had been naive and driven by his resentment towards his father, and that he didn't mean the hurtful things he had said to me. He expressed a desire to work things out and suggested going to counseling, but I reminded him that my attorney had already filed the paperwork. The divorce was finalized, and our marriage was over, just as he had wanted. I pointed out that he was the one who initiated the process and followed through with it, and I had given him the freedom he sought. I ended the call and haven't spoken to him since, nor do I wish to engage with him further. I hope he learns a lesson from this, but I won't be used to help him gain financial advantages. Update number 4. It's been a while since my last update, as I've been busy with various life events. Business has been thriving, and I'm currently writing this in between engagements. First, I had a meeting with my lawyer to sign the divorce paperwork. I had the option to choose between receiving a lump sum of money or monthly payments, and I opted for the monthly payments. I also found a home that I like and am awaiting the bank's decision. Additionally, I recently had a meeting with Aiden's brother and sister, the first time we've met since the lawyer's appointment. We discussed a charity event that the foundation is hosting in memory of their father, and I'm assisting with the planning. As a part of the event, I've been scouting various venues. During our conversation, I received an update on Aiden. He had falsely accused me of taking the house from him in the divorce. However, they already knew this wasn't true because divorce filings are public and can be accessed by anyone. When they asked him why he was lying, he expressed frustration and stated that I should have given him the house back, given that I had received a substantial sum of money from his father. I clarified that if he wanted the house back, it was available on the market, and he could purchase it. They also mentioned that he was living in an apartment near his workplace, and he inquired about how I was doing through his brother, if he could get more involved in the foundation to earn some extra money, but his brother shut down that idea. He made it clear that there was no way Aiden would be put on the payroll, especially after the stunt he pulled with the foundation funds. And that's the extent of the drama up until now. I'm sincerely hoping this marks the end of it, as I am determined to move past Aiden and all the chaos he brought into my life. I refuse to let him waste another moment of my time. Top comments from the updates. Comment number 1. Well done, OP, for not falling into his trap. As much as divorce is painful, it's sometimes akin to removing a tumor. This guy was toxic for you and merely used you to fulfill his sick revenge fantasy against his father. It seems like his dad was aware of his son's questionable character and ensured he received something for his pain. He appeared to consider you a part of his family. Kudos to your brother-in-law for supporting you. Many men stay silent when their friends and family members behave atrociously. I'm relieved he's not one of them. Additionally, don't let your ex manipulate or pressure you into having a child together. He'll likely continue bothering you. So don't give in, OP. Comment number 2. I somewhat agree with your ex, OP. Perhaps you could have at least given him the house back. I understand the divorce was finalized, and the paperwork was in order, and I comprehend the pain he caused you. However, it feels petty to deny him a place to live. I'm certain your lawyers could have navigated the bureaucratic hurdles and transferred the house to his name. Also, your father-in-law is just as petty. Why did only your husband have conditions on his inheritance? If he wanted to squander it irresponsibly, that should have been his choice. Forcing someone to stay married for 5 years just to obtain the money feels distasteful. All right, let's have a discussion about this. I'm curious about your thoughts, especially concerning the last comment. This specific comment stirred up quite a reaction in the original post. Almost everyone disagreed with the commenter. The majority could see that OP's ex got what he deserved, but this person's perspective was entirely different. What are your thoughts on this comment? Feel free to share your opinions down below in the comments section. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Mr. Reddit, and I narrate stories daily. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you'd like to support the channel. And if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. I'll be back tomorrow. Remember, kindness is always cool. Peace. My name is Ivy, and the moment I learned about my cancer diagnosis, both my mother-in-law and husband turned their backs on me. Our marriage, which was supposed to endure sickness and health, crumbled when my husband, Isaac, realized that my time might be limited. He chose to run away and ghost me. Fortunately, I found solace in the unexpected support of my father-in-law, Theodore, who turned out to be the father-in-law of the century. At 31 years old, facing the devastation of cancer after a couple of challenging months was unexpected. However, what truly baffled me was the audacity of my mother-in-law, Georgia. Despite the vows of marriage, she compelled Isaac to abandon me, claiming there was no hope left. Such heartlessness is beyond comprehension. Georgia's monstrous side, rooted in an inflated sense of self-importance, always fueled her judgmental remarks. While economic differences between our families were not substantial, her family's additional wealth of around $500 created a sense of superiority. Beyond finances, our relationship faced the common misunderstandings found in any marriage. However, with my mother-in-law, these clashes escalated to toxic levels. She consistently mistreated me based on her misinterpretations, making it a painful experience, with Isaac occasionally attempting to mediate. The turning point came 7 weeks ago when I received the gut-wrenching cancer diagnosis. Initially, we tried to come to terms with it, but my mother-in-law's behavior became increasingly erratic and toxic. Her influence over Isaac grew, and her misinterpretations led to painful situations. A few days after sharing my diagnosis, she callously suggested Isaac move to the bedroom TV since I would soon be confined to bed, adding insult to injury. When I implored Isaac to address his mother's insensitivity, he initially complied, only to later join in her heartless laughter. He dismissed my feelings, asking me to chill out and take a joke. As they continued their classless jokes and mockery, even in the absence of Theodore, my father-in-law, I felt isolated and defenseless. Theodore, often away from home, preferred the company of friends, leaving me vulnerable to the mother-son duo's heartless antics. I endured their absurdities while grappling with my health struggles, a situation that would be almost comical if it weren't painfully real. Fortunately, we didn't have children, and as time passed, it became evident that Isaac was far from an ideal partner for parenthood. While not entirely monstrous, they occasionally lent a hand, often accompanied by backhanded comments and negativity. Drained and worn down, I couldn't summon the energy to wage wars or respond to hurtful words in my already burdened heart. The worst was yet to come, and it arrived on a day when Isaac was absent due to work commitments. As my health deteriorated, with regular bouts of sickness and loss of control over my senses, Theodore out of the house, it fell upon Georgia to handle the mess. While there were no jokes that day, her silent treatment spoke volumes, dispelling any doubts about her feelings towards me. Hint, she did not like me. It was evident she was growing tired of me, and the scariest part was that she didn't shy away from showing it. In desperation, I suggested hiring a nurse to lighten the load. You'd think it was a reasonable solution, but according to Georgia, Theodore had refused to even consider it in a conversation I was convinced she had never had with him in my presence. I couldn't help but believe that if he knew of my suffering, he wouldn't deny me help. However, according to Georgia, they were already taking care of me, and the nurse would be a waste of money. This wasn't an isolated incident. It happened multiple times. Despite living comfortably with her husband's money, when I needed genuine help, there was silence. To add insult to injury, she started encouraging Isaac to meet new people, by which she meant women, different women. Initially, I thought she wanted him to connect with those dealing with sick relatives like me, but I was wrong. Her ulterior motive was clear. She wanted him to get in touch with women to easily replace me. At first, Isaac played the role of the faithful husband, but slowly his behavior changed. Late nights out transformed into late-night phone conversations, audible as I drifted in and out of sleep. The gravity of the situation became painfully clear 2 weeks ago, in the middle of my afternoon nap. When I heard the front door open and then shut, followed by the murmur of multiple voices, mostly female, filling the living room, I knew Georgia was in the house. Isaac was at the office. It was just 9 days ago that one of these women returned, making it evident that her visit wasn't for me. She came to see Isaac. They stayed in the living room, seemingly acting decently, but my intuition sensed something was off. My suspicions were confirmed when Georgia left me alone, sneaking out of the house, assuming I was already asleep. I couldn't decipher what happened between them in that single hour, but I knew they were making plans that didn't include me. The peculiar thing was that this woman never visited me. She was always there for Isaac. 5 days ago, Georgia approached me, announcing that she had arranged for a nurse to take over my duties. I couldn't help but question her abrupt change of heart. Her response was absurd and infuriating. They were leaving me. When I pressed for an explanation, she casually answered that they needed space to accept that I would soon die. I was left dumbfounded. It made no sense. That wasn't a reasonable reaction to my situation. According to her logic, she had found a new woman for Isaac, someone perfectly healthy, as if my illness was repulsive. According to her, Isaac needed space to move on. How heartless could one person be? It was beyond comprehension, beyond any semblance of human decency. Their grand idea was to leave me on my own while they enjoyed their newfound freedom, not burdened by the responsibilities of caring for a sick person. Georgia had found a replacement for me, a potential wife for Isaac, who would conveniently step into my shoes the moment I passed away. The audacity of it all was staggering. She expected me to accept this fate because I was battling cancer, as if my diagnosis granted them the right to abandon me. I attempted to talk to Isaac about the situation, but he conveniently avoided me as much as possible. In the brief moments we spoke, he reassured me not to worry too much, and before I knew it, they were gone. Amidst these sudden developments, another strange occurrence took place. My father-in-law, who had always kept his distance, started calling and messaging me. The nurse stepped up, tending to my every need, from cooking to cleaning. Everything that Georgia and Isaac had promised but failed to deliver. Georgia initially paid for her, but eventually, the entire responsibility fell on my shoulders, and I started using whatever savings I had left to compensate her. Theodore, who had maintained his silence during the entire fiasco, now bombarded my phone with calls and messages. In sickness and in health, Isaac had promised, yet this was his response. He proved to be nothing short of trash. Now, I'm utterly curious about what my father-in-law wants. Surely he was not calling without reason. I'll update you with the top comments from the original post. Comment number 1. Look, I don't entirely want to side with your family, but it does kind of make sense why they took such big steps to preserve their own feelings. Losing somebody hurts, and I've lost several of my loved ones, and I still hate knowing them. Well, it would have saved me so much pain if I hadn't known them. Everybody has the right to defend themselves against that kind of pain. Your family was a little too extreme, though, and I'm really sorry for you. Cancer sounds bad enough. Maybe try contacting your own family. Where are they anyway? Comment number 2. It's a shame doing this isn't criminal, but the way your husband has behaved is disgusting. Forget your mother-in-law. Your husband is the biggest trash here. I wonder what your father-in-law wants, but maybe you should talk to him once as well. Maybe he wants to say something important. Update number 1. My father-in-law and I had a conversation, and now we find ourselves living in the same neighborhood. He spent a fortune to rent the nearest home to where I currently live, away from his wife and son. Yeah, it might sound surprising, but after years of silence, he finally found the courage to speak up. 7 days ago, he reached out to me again, and I decided it was time to confront the truth. I realized that clarifying things with him once and for all would help the situation. I decided that if my family wanted to cut ties with me, I would not back down either. Dying alone would be much better than crying over crappy people like Georgia and Isaac. In the past 2 weeks, my health has continued to go down. I find myself bleeding profusely, and even the thought of food disgusted me. When he called, I mustered the strength to answer, ready to hear whatever he wanted to talk about. The moment I picked up the phone, he immediately apologized for staying silent for so long and did not shy away from accepting whatever his wife and son did to me as wrong. He confessed that he was not paying attention to what was going on at home, and then told me how shocked he was with their decision to abandon me. He found their actions utterly classless, crass, and intolerable, and no longer wanted to stay with them. That's why he reached out to me. Well, since I held no grudge against him and was in a desperate situation, I accepted him back into my life. At that point, I was far too tired to care much about the details, and so for the past 7 days, we've been living as neighbors. He comes over to check up on me 3 times a day and has also decided to take the responsibility of paying for my nurse with her weekly payments. But that's not really what is developing in these past weeks. There are a couple more things that happened. Allow me to explain. When the news of my father-in-law staying with me reached my mother-in-law and husband, they acted very swiftly. They reached out to him first, leaving voicemails, sending messages. They kept apologizing to him and then asked if he was upset with them. My father-in-law showed me every single message. It was comical to me because it was obvious why they were so desperate. They were heavily dependent on him and could not afford anything. My father-in-law getting upset at them. Well, it's not helping. But he remained silent, ignoring every call and message. Days turned into a week, and their desperation started to grow. Suddenly, they started bombarding me with phone calls and messages. At this time, neither the calls nor the messages stopped. Initially, their messages had been about little things, but now it was about them at my father-in-law's suggestion. I made a decision not to answer their calls or messages. Their newfound concern felt fake, and it was evident they did not care for me but for themselves. Who wants to play that game? I was sick, but I was not a doormat. Their desperation reached an absolute peak when they showed up at my door with a bag of fruits and lots of words of sympathy. Before my nurse or I could update them about my health, they started probing about my father-in-law's whereabouts. Since he was neither at my house nor theirs, I replied just as he had instructed me to in such a situation. I explained that his office was nearby, and staying here saved him extra cash he would be required to spend from the new place they stay at. They were not content with my response. Financially, they had always been well off, and my explanation likely did not fulfill their assumptions. Regardless, they accepted it at face value, seemingly uncaring whether it was true. They again asked me about my health, stayed some 5 more minutes at my home, and then told me that they needed to be somewhere important. But I did not care. I wanted them to leave already. She said they would leave in a while, and I was not sure what they wanted. But I hoped that they would have the sensibility to address what they had done to me. At the very least, I expected her to offer me an explanation for their actions. I assumed I could ask for that much, but sensibility was clearly beyond their grasp. Instead of doing any of that, my mother-in-law dropped the bomb while Isaac was in the kitchen. She revealed that Isaac was getting interested in the women he was seeing. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. Even though I had sensed their intentions, I was not shocked that they had made these kinds of plans, as it was clear from the beginning. But that they were dead serious about going through with it was another matter. This was no elaborate joke. I was still alive. It had only been a little over a month since my diagnosis, and they were already going to such lengths to distance themselves. As one of my comments pointed out, is this how you defend yourself against the potential of getting hurt by isolating the person in need? The audacity of that woman knew no boundaries. And if that was not enough, she claimed that she had planned a few dates for Isaac and the other women. My nurse, bless her, tried to put an end to this cruel conversation, informing my mother-in-law that I needed rest. Then she mentioned her hopes that I might attend, quote, at least his engagement party. Yeah, the audacity rises. But she did not stop there. Oh no, she promised to send me the divorce papers on Isaac's behalf, indifferent to any response I might have. According to her, it was better to handle the paperwork before I lost my senses, as if I were on the brink of insanity. Yeah, her logic. It would save Isaac potential heartache, and the divorce would allow him to get over me quickly with this new woman by his side. My nurse, her eyes fixed on me, probably wondered how I was managing to endure such insanity. Yesterday, true to her promise, she sent the divorce papers, and Isaac had already signed them, along with a confirmation from his side indicating that he did not care about me at all. Although deeply hurt, I cannot say I was entirely surprised. I always knew what they were like. Instead of reacting impulsively, as I desperately wanted to, I waited. I waited to share this news with my father-in-law. When I told him about the divorce papers, he looked not just disgusted and disturbed but also betrayed. After spending countless years with his son and wife, he must have held out some hope for decency and compassion. Yet, he made a promise. He vowed to take his weekend off the next week, setting aside time for us to confront this legal nightmare together. I was not sure about his intentions, but facing a more stable person while I was dealing with my illness seemed like a better option than dealing with it on my own. Update number 2. He came over to my place and then told me that he had been thinking over some things for some time now. When I questioned him about what he meant, he introduced me to his lawyer dealing with our case. He informed me that his first words to the lawyer or that he had given enough time for his wife and son to come around. But since he saw no improvement in their behavior, he was going with the plan. And I knew what he was planning. On that particular weekend, he came to my home with his lawyer. I was excited about whatever he had in store. We began discussing the divorce situation, and then he dropped the news on me. The thing he said he had been contemplating for a while. He wanted to make changes to his will. Even with his lawyer attempting to discuss the matter seriously, he kept insisting that he had thought enough on the topic and did not want to think about it anymore. It took an entire day of intense discussions, but by the day's end, I found myself the sole heir to every possession that he owned. He had cut them out entirely, leaving them with nothing more than a small plot in a barren countryside, a worthless piece of land that had nothing around for miles and miles. I knew my father-in-law had just made their lives harder, and I thought that was the end of it. But then he surprised me again. He summoned another pair of lawyers, and they were discussing divorce. Yes, you read that right. It was no longer solely about me. My father-in-law was on the brink of making the most important decision of his life. He planned not only to strip his wife of everything, but also to divorce her overnight. He looked at me and asked if I was all right with divorcing Isaac. After everything Isaac put me through, I did not need to think twice about it. I responded firmly, stating that after all this betrayal, I would be a fool to stay with him. And just like that, it was settled. I was going to divorce Isaac, and my father-in-law was going to divorce his wife, Georgia, and there's no turning back. The lawyer suggested we wait at least a month before filing for divorce, so that it would not look too hurried and planned to the court. We just agreed to wait. While all this was going on in our homes, my mother-in-law kept badgering me to sign the divorce papers. Isaac's silence was less annoying than whatever she was doing. It was like she wanted to get rid of me. I hoped that in the days to come, she would have to deal with wilder consequences than Isaac. I tried to tell her off, giving my chemotherapy treatment as an excuse, hoping that she would stop. To some extent, it worked. She lowered the frequency of calling me, but her demands never ended. She even dared to send me a picture of the women she intended for Isaac, adding insults to the injury with her questioning, "Isn't she pretty for Isaac?" Care to explain to me if you would have dealt with something like that? However, all of her crafty behavior only made my father-in-law more determined. He never forgot to apologize for his wife's behavior, and in a mere 5 days, this month will end, and both my mother-in-law and Isaac will receive the consequences of their actions. My mother-in-law will get a legal notice, and Isaac will receive those signed divorce papers he wants. If all goes according to plan, this would be the end of our interactions on all levels. Update number 3. The divorce bombshell shook Georgia's world. Much to my amusement, she had been prepared for many things, but not for this. Upon receiving the legal notice, she dropped a storm of calls on my father-in-law's phone. When he refused to answer, she stormed over to both our places, demanding an explanation. My father-in-law was at my place for his routine checkup, and he had no choice but to tell her the blunt truth in my presence. He was tired of her and had contemplated this step for a long time. It was clear why he preferred the company of his friends over staying at home with his wife. Immediately, she broke down almost on her knees. She pleaded with him not to leave, and it was at that moment that the reality had hit her. My father-in-law kicked her out of his life. Then Isaac barged in, and because his parents were divorcing, he was now worried about himself. He knew things were not going to end very well for him, and he promised me that he did not want a divorce. But his mother forced him to have it. I told him I didn't care. This entire mom-son drama went on for the whole day until they left in the evening, empty-handed and hopeless. The legal proceedings were progressing relatively smoothly, and just when it seemed like we were on the verge of closure, my father-in-law dropped the truth. He claimed to have nothing to his name. Despite this, the court still ordered him to pay a certain amount of money to Georgia each month. It was a financial loss for us, but my father-in-law was relieved to have finally cut her off from his life. Meanwhile, the issue with the will was yet to be out in the open, and the court admonished Isaac for abandoning me and told him to pay me alimony. We hoped that with everything settled, life would finally calm down, and I would be able to deal with my upcoming painful months in peace without any of their drama. However, our hopes were shattered when Georgia and Isaac unexpectedly showed up at my house for yet another meeting. During their unexpected visit, they came up with an idea, a negotiation of sorts, after they found out the truth about the will. If they had approached it differently, I might have felt sympathy, but they chose to be cruel. Georgia, in her typical manner, claimed that since I was not going to live long, it made no sense for me to hold so much property in my name. I just brushed off her words. I had already made a decision with my father-in-law. We knew what was going to happen as tensions escalated. Isaac, viewing my response as an insult to his mother, immediately thought of violence and raised his hand against me. My nurse immediately called the police, and by the time they arrived, the mother and son duo had fled the scene. Using my nurse and my father-in-law's witnesses, I asked for a restraining order. Given my fragile state due to my illness, it did not take long for the order to be issued. The court warned Isaac about his behavior, stating that repeating such actions would lead to an immediate charge, no questions asked. Since then, none of those two have contacted either of us, and honestly, considering my health, I don't care. The doctors gave me a time limit now, and I'm just hoping I prove them all wrong. Other than that, no new drama. I'm glad most of you were respectful enough, and yes, I might have liked a couple of dark jokes you played on me. By the way, I've got none, and that's why this entire thing was so hard for me. Top comments from the final update. Comment number 1. You're the literal definition of taking everything to the grave. LMAO. Hey, that's cool though. Your father-in-law's smart decision saved you big time because honestly, it's so rare to have that kind of thinking person around you. It's true that you may not live long, but the way your family reacted, wow, that was extreme. I'm glad I've never dealt with something like this. They're toxic as hell. At least they will die poor. Comment number 2. I'm so curious. Is the woman you're talking about? Didn't she, know that you're sick? How could one woman be so mean to another? I mean, where's the sisterhood? All for a dang man, and one that would not even stay faithful to the same woman he vowed to stay with for all his life. Like, wow. I'm so glad I like girls because honestly, this is too much for me. Good luck soon. I hope you win this war. Well, we just reviewed 2 of the comments, and I have to agree with the last one. I can't believe somebody would be so mean to somebody else, knowing that they were battling such an illness. But yet, OP had to deal with this mother-in-law of today's story that was an absolute nightmare. Lucky for OP, she did have her father-in-law who went so far to try to save her, get her back, give her support, and basically get her to cut out the toxicness, which was unfortunately his son and his wife. I want to know your thoughts on this one, guys. Go ahead, drop your comments down below. This one was an intense one. It had sad moments. It had exhilarating moments, but overall, it looks like karma came again. So drop your thoughts down below, guys. My name is Mr. Reddit. I narrate these sorts of stories every single day. If you guys want to be a part of these daily videos, all you have to do is subscribe to the channel. Hit that like notification. And well, I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow. Remember, it's cool to be kind. Peace.